Hello again. So I said I was going to be back. Yeah, earlier I done earlier today I did a video responding to some of primarily one comment from Rebuke and Reprove on his video where he had a discussion with Wildheart, and then obviously ended that one after 35 minutes. I think I did everything I needed to do there, and I said that I was going to come back and look at another individual's claims. Apparently, this person thinks that well, they seem to really have a thing for atheists and lies. So I found this video, I think a week and a half ago, maybe a couple weeks ago, and watched a little bit of it, and I was just like, "Oh, this guy's got some really bad." I don't know his. I don't know this person. I've never interacted with this particular individual before. Um, his channel is called Atheist Lies. Apparently, he had another channel, um, and then he switched over to this channel. He had two channels, but he shut the other channel down and then moved to this one primarily. And he's got about 80 some videos on there. The interesting thing is when I read his about section on the very last line says don't use, basically no one is allowed to use any of my content. It's really hard for anybody. It's interesting that somebody would needs to say that. It's like if you're saying that because you don't want anybody doing commentary on your video, um, good luck with that, because YouTube's terms of service actually allows for people to do that. So um, as long as we're not using it, we're not streaming his whole videos look like it's our own, or just you have to actually do a criticism of it. Anyway, um, I hope I saved that. I think I did. Anyway, let's get into this video. I've got Kevin Lentini in here. Morning, Kevin. Well, at least it's morning for me. Um, and then it's just showing I have two viewers, but we'll get into this.
All right. So, actual scriptures that you guys, atheists, love to throw out and say that the Bible condones this and that chattel slavery is exactly like what's in the Bible. Sure.
That's a,
Some
that's exactly like what's in the Bible. I'm not sure. I think you might maybe meant to say that they think it's exactly like antebellum slavery. I don't know.
of these you throw at me, some of them you don't. Luke, New Testament, 17, verse 7. After a servant has finished his work in the field or with the livestock, he will be called in from his work. He won't go and relax immediately. He'll cook the food. The servant prepares the food for his master and makes sure his master is served his meal before he sits down to eat. Now, the lie is from the atheists, they will say, sure, he eats at the table, but
There's a problem with his reading of Luke 17, but let him keep going.
that's long after. That's like at night after everybody's gone to bed. It doesn't say that. It says that he cooks it, servant cooks it, serves it, and makes sure that everybody's got what they want and eating, and then sits down and eats. It doesn't say later. It doesn't say at a different time. It's very well spelled out there.
Okay, so the problem here that I see from this, or that I'm hearing from this, is that he's using Luke 17 as though it's a prescriptive, that this is Jesus saying that, hey, this is what's going to happen when it comes to your slaves doing, if they've been working in the field, then they're going to come in and whatever. So let me go to the verse. This is Luke 17, New Revised Standard Version, updated edition. I'll share the tab. And I'm going to read the whole thing in context. Jesus said to his disciples, occasions for sin are bound to come, but woe to anyone through whom they come. It would be better for you if a millstone were hung around your neck and you were thrown into the sea than for you to cause one of these little ones to sin. Be on your guard. If a brother or sister sins, you must rebuke the offender, and if there is repentance, you must forgive. And if the same person sins against you 7 times a day and turns back to you 7 times and says, I repent, you must forgive. The apostle said to the Lord, increase our faith. The Lord replied, if you had faith the size of a mustard seed, you could say to this mulberry tree, be uprooted and planted in the sea, and it would obey you. And then continues on. This is still Jesus speaking. Who among you would say to your slave who has just come in from plowing or tending sheep in the field, come here at once and take your place at the table? Would you not rather say to him, prepare supper for me, put on your apron and serve me while I eat and drink. Later you may eat and drink. Do you thank the slave for doing what was commanded? So you also, when you have done all that you were ordered to do, say, we are worthless slaves. We have done only what we ought to have done. So this is an analogy as far as I can tell, right? He's saying he's giving them an example and asking them a hypothetical. Um, so I'm going to switch over to this tab here. This is from Did the Old Testament Endorse Slavery by Dr. Joshua Bowen. He writes about this. I happen to agree with his take on it, and it seems he agrees, and it seems that there are other people that he quotes and cites here that he agrees with as well. We will the unprofitable slaves of Luke 17. We will begin with Luke 17, 7 through 10, and Jesus' statements about unprofitable slaves. And I'm not going to read that again. That's the same. I read a little bit more, but it's still the same verses that I had just previously read. While Jesus' story is concerned with the actions and attitudes of his disciples, it also provides us with insight into the current attitudes towards slavery. Green writes, Jesus is not so much inviting an allegorical reading of master-servant roles as drawing on a well-known reality of village life to teach something about, let me read that again. Wow. Jesus is not so much inviting an allegorical reading of master-servant roles as drawing on a well-known reality of village life to teach something about faithfulness. Envisioned is a small landholder farmer whose one slave performs the various outdoor and household duties that would be divided between slaves in a larger estate. The household master-slave analogy has become a regular fixture of the Lucan narrative, providing a basis for important instructions on kinship, faithfulness, and status seeking. The message is that just as a slave who performed his required duties is due no special thanks or treatment and thus earns nothing by it, so also followers of Jesus who perform their required duties are due no special reward thereby. Fitzmyer writes, in the present Lucan setting, Jesus' word stresses that the Christian disciple who is a servant or slave and has well carried out his task can only regard himself as an unprofitable servant. What is assumed by this story, therefore, is 1, the reality of slavery during Jesus' time, 2, the appropriateness of drawing the analogy based on the details of that reality, and 3, the complete lack of condemnation for the practice as described in the analogy. And then slavery as the norm. Throughout the book of Luke, in fact, the parables and stories of Jesus show reliance on the normalcy and acceptance of the practice of slavery. Charles calls attention to the stories of the slaves in Luke 12 who remain alert while awaiting their master's return in verses 35 through 46, contrasted with those who received beatings for improper behavior, verses 47 through 48, along with depictions seen in chapters 14 through 16. Far from condemning the practice of slavery, Charles explains that Jesus, as he does throughout the Gospels, relied on a normative portrayal of the slave in antiquity to illustrate his teachings. This pattern can also be seen in Deutero-Pauline writings, as Glancy notes that the Pauline letters speak directly to Christian slaveholders and slaves, indicating the presence within the local Christian community of both slaves and slaveholders. She continues to say that the New Testament epistles consider slaveholding compatible with membership in the Christian body. Emphasis mine. In the end, one would be hard-pressed to argue that the New Testament, Jesus included, clearly and overtly condemns the practice of owning another human being as property. In fact, we see time and again that Jesus utilizes the well-known practice of slavery to teach principles of appropriate behavior and loyalty within the context of discipleship. Passages that are cited to support open or implied condemnation of the practice, including Galatians 3:28, 1 Timothy 1:10, the book of Philemon, or even the parable of the talents, are in fact not setting forth any such condemnation. And then he goes into slavery in the early church.
Okay. Now there's also stuff in the Old Testament that says the same thing. This is in the New Testament.
I don't know of anything in the Old Testament that talks about where it states that, well, a slave is afforded the ability to basically come in and make food and then would eat with their master after performing their duties outside. I don't know where I don't know where those verses are in the Old Testament, so I don't know what he's referring to.
Okay, now let's see. In Colossians 4:1, provide.
Okay, that's the other one that I wanted to look up. Okay, I don't know where he's going to go with this because I haven't heard this part.
Provide your slaves with what is right and fair, because you know that you also have a master in heaven. He's saying, listen, you do the same thing for other Christians, and God's going to treat you fair, and He's going to treat you right, and you do that for each other. You also are going to do that for your slaves. Treat them with what's right and what's fair.
The problem with that is that it's what's fair and what's right when it comes to a slave. However, with Paul believed that Jesus as Christ was going to happen within his lifetime. It was going to happen very soon. So this idea of like abolishing slavery wasn't even an issue. It was just, look, do the right things here, behave yourselves, that kind of thing, because Jesus is coming and he's coming within our lifetime. So Colossians 4:1, I'm not going to, it just says, masters, treat your slaves justly and fairly, for you know that you also have a master in heaven. And then it just says, devote yourselves to prayer, keeping alert in it with thanksgiving, at the same time, prayer for us as well. But it's not in any way condemning, this doesn't condemn the idea of slavery. It doesn't mean that slaves are of the same status as freeborn citizens. They're still slaves. So I don't know what that does in any way, shape, or form. And the idea that no master, like a slave master, couldn't treat their slaves well is problematic, right? It's the idea that, well, if I own something, then I will automatically just treat it like a piece of shit. Is You don't have to even go there. It's the concept of the ownership. It's with the foreign slaves in the Old Testament, it's the fact that they are property. They're your possession. Does that mean you can, just arbitrarily kick them through a wall or throw them through a window or something like that? No, not all masters there were probably some cruel masters, some harsh masters, but that doesn't mean to say that all of them had to be cruel. That's their property, and there were some restrictions on what people who had slaves could do, even to their foreign slaves, right? You couldn't outwardly, at least according to Exodus 21, it seems you couldn't just outwardly, just arbitrarily kill a slave.
Chattel slavery, exact opposite. Okay, not the same thing.
No, that's not an argument. You could treat your slaves right and fair, and they would still be considered movable property under their status. Chattel slavery just refers to the type of slavery where the individual that is a slave is basically considered as a possession, something that can actually be passed down as property. That's in Leviticus 25:44 through 46. treating them fairly and giving them what's right is no way would change the status of them being movable property.
So stop lying about that. Right there.
Chattel slavery does not, it doesn't necessarily follow that if you have chattel slaves, therefore they are going to be beaten, or they must be beaten, or they must be treated harshly.
They're in the Bible. In Deuteronomy 23:15 and 23, Deuteronomy is talking about if a slave is mistreated and runs away because people aren't following the rules and they take refuge with you, don't bring them back to that evil master, that evil.
No, that is not what Deuteronomy 23 is saying at all. So oh, okay. Do you have my email, Pat? I think you do. I mean, it's pretty easy. It's just my name that's on here, j.pasick@gmail.com. I don't think, let me know if I'm getting any of this wrong, but I know that some of Dr. Josh's book there gets into that. I think kind of gets into that as well. But hey, Red Fang, I see you're here. And then Kevin writes, I was listening to Adam Smith's book recently, and he claimed that Augustus established laws against treating slaves cruelly in Rome and actually made slavers free them if they were found to be abused. Interesting. I'm not sure who Adam Smith is. Let me look that person up real quick. Oh, okay. Adam Smith, the professor and moral philosopher, was a strong opponent of slavery. Um, okay. Wait. There's something else that he wrote about. Well, there's also an okay. There's also an Adam Smith who believed in laissez-faire free market philosophy. Okay, that's a Scottish economist. Anyway, um, yeah. So share this tab instead here. Make sure I'm on the right thing here. Yep. All right. So the sanitary ritual and humanitarian precepts. This is Deuteronomy 23. Um, and he went to 15, but it says you shall have designated. So just so people don't think there's something that becomes before 15. There's 12. You shall have designated areas outside the camp in which you shall go with your tools. You shall have a trowel when you relieve yourself outside, and you shall dig a hole with it and then cover up your excrement. Because the Lord your God travels along with your camp to save you and your hand over your enemies to you, therefore your camp must be holy, so that you may not see anything indecent among you and turn away from you. You shall not return to their owners' slaves who have escaped to you from their owners. They shall reside with you in your midst in any place they choose, in any one of your towns, wherever they please. You shall not oppress them. So it does not say anything about their being treated in a bad way or that their masters are evil. It also doesn't state that the masters of those slaves couldn't come into Israel and possibly retrieve their slave from Israel. So it's a lot of people make the mistake that this is like an asylum, this is like a refugee status for them. I don't I don't think that's even the case. I don't think it's the case by reading it. It's just the Israelites are just like, yeah, we'll just leave that alone. And if the master comes, they come. Other than that, we just keep them as like someone who's passing through or whatever. Let me see if there's any commentary from. Um, oh, that's Deuteronomy 15. Okay. So I haven't read this part. I think I'll go ahead and read it. All right, slave escape or movement. There are many laws concerning the movement or escape of a slave in the ancient Near East collections, but none concern the apparent nuance that is seen in Deuteronomy 23:15 through 16, where a slave escapes from a foreign country into their country. Because of this, there is not a one-to-one correspondence between the law collections and Deuteronomy, and it does not appear that the biblical laws directly address the problem of a runaway slave, which is noteworthy. Um, and so he's got LU 16, LH 17. These are referring to the different law codes. Um, so this is probably Urnama. Maybe this is Hittite, I'm assuming. Anyway, um, so LU 16, female slave escaped the town and is returned. Punishment or result, 2 shekels paid to one who returns her. LH 17, man catches runaway slave in open country and returns them. 2 shekels of silver. So it's just basically comparing law code there. Nearly all the major law collections containing stipulations concerning or they contain stipulations concerning runaway slaves. LU 16 explains that if a slave woman escapes from town only to be caught and returned, the one returning her is to pay 2 shekels of silver. LL 12 deals with a slave who runs away but remains in the city. If he enters another man's house and is harbored there for 1 month, the owner of the house is not only to return the runaway slave, but to pay the additional slave as a penalty. If pay an additional slave as a penalty if he has no slave. LL 13 requires him to pay 15 shekels of silver. LE 50 considers an official who keeps a runaway slave belonging either to the palace or to a commoner for himself. Should he do so, he is considered a thief and will be punished accordingly. In LE 51, marked slaves of Ashnuna residents are not allowed to go out of the city without the permission of the slave owner. In addition, any slave with a foreign envoy is to be marked upon entering the city according to LE 52. This is comparing the other ancient Near East law codes in contrast to what we're reading in Deuteronomy 23. Just a heads up for anybody who missed that. LH 15 describes unwillingly enabling a palace or commoners a slave to escape. The penalty for such a crime is death. LH 16 speaks of someone who harbors a runaway slave of the palace or of a commoner. The death penalty is prescribed in this situation as well. LH 17 through 20 all deal with a man who catches a runaway slave in open country. In LH 17, if he returns the runaway slave to his master, he is to be paid 2 shekels of silver. And I can probably go on and go on, go on. And then he has the other ones that he's focusing on. So I'll skip here, go finally in Deuteronomy 23:50, because basically these are all the laws. It seems to be that there's some kind of they were more specific about how to deal with runaway slaves. Finally in Deuteronomy 23:15 through 16, verses 16 through 17, in the Hebrew text, a non-Israelite slave escapes from a foreign land and enters the land of Israel. The people of Israel are to essentially take a hands-off approach to the slave. They are neither to return him to his master, nor are they to keep him in their house. Instead, they are to simply allow him to live wherever he chooses. And then analysis. The laws seem to consistently deal with the same problems with runaway slaves: return fees, what to do if they can't return the slave, harboring an escaped slave or aiding them in their escape, stealing a runaway slave, exceptions to returning them, the debtor's responsibility for a runaway's pledge, and how slaves are to be marked during travel. 4 of these laws deal with the fee of returning a runaway slave and contain similar payment amounts and rationale. Harboring or aiding a runaway slave was considered a serious offense in the laws of Hammurabi, incurring the death penalty, the same penalty for stealing a runaway slave. In contrast to this, the laws of Lipit Ishtar and the Hittite laws seem to assign the penalty at the value of the slave or the value of their labor output. Perhaps the most interesting comparison, however, can be seen in LH 87 and Deuteronomy 23:15-16. It has long been noted that the law in Deuteronomy is an apparent anomaly in the ancient Near East. As you can see from the above discussion, the law requires a runaway slave to be returned, and punishments can be severe for failing to do so. However, there are 2 things to keep in mind. First, as we have discussed, Deuteronomy 23:15-16 is not simply a general law concerning any runaway slave. The most likely scenario being described is a foreign slave escaping from a foreign nation into Israel. This is likely not the humanitarian law that is sometimes held up to be. Instead, it is a law against having extradition treaties with Israel's neighbors. However, when we look at the admittedly fragmentary laws of LH 87, we see that it seems to state that a runaway slave, if there is some type of beating involved, is not to be returned to his master. If this is the correct interpretation of the law, then this may indicate that the laws of Hammurabi considered the abuse of a slave by his master and sought to protect the slave from said abuse by keeping the abused slave from being returned to their master. Conclusion. What meaningful conclusion can we draw from this comparative data? Although there is not a complete correspondence between the laws in the ancient Near East and those in the Old Testament, there is a significant amount of overlap in a variety of cases. When we take a step back and view the comparison in each section from a distance, we can see patterns that arise from our analyses. What we find is that, on the whole, the laws of the Old Testament are not much different from the other law collections, and they are concerned with essentially the same issues. We see that, 1, they are generally concerned with the vulnerable party in a given transaction from their point of view, and 2, what was considered illegal in the laws of the Old Testament was not considered illegal in the ancient Near Eastern collections. As we saw in the various laws concerning the sale of slaves, the legal collections attempt to protect the vulnerable party in the transaction. Of course, given that the institution of slavery was the societal norm, the slave was often not considered the vulnerable party, even when being sold. From the point of view of the ancient Near Eastern writers, a buyer was protected against the slave becoming ill after the sale, being the object of future claims arising after their purchase, and being cheated or price gouged. Debtors were also protected against their pledges being sold without their permission or a chance to redeem them. Even masters were protected against the loss of a slave due to required universal manumission in places like Leviticus 25:44-46. Slave wives and concubines were also considered in the law collections. They were often protected from being separated from their children and were required to be provided for by masters who no longer wished to be with them. Slave women were frequently to be freed along with their children when a married master already had children with his wife or upon the death of her master. Debt slaves also fell under this protection as severe penalties would follow, often death for abusing debt slave or for abusing a debt slave and causing their immediate death. Furthermore, it would appear that both the laws of Hammurabi and Deuteronomy contained a provision for a runaway slave not to be returned to their master, although the express purpose of the law in LH 87 may have been for more humane purposes. Um, there are other parallels between the laws that we investigated above in both Exodus 21, 2 through 6, and LU 4. We see that just because a slave husband was released or manumitted, this did not entail that the wife slave would go out with him. So, and it's going back through the entire. Okay, I think I've covered enough. So, yeah, with Deuteronomy, the conclusion that this person on the video is drawing, there's nothing to say that that the owner of the slave is necessarily an evil person.
Slave owner, do not take them back. Let them take refuge with you and don't take them back. Okay.
It's not an asylum seeking. That's not asylum seeking. I would agree. It's probably more of a hands-off approach. There's nothing there that prohibits the master of the owner of the slave to come into Israel and take that slave back. There doesn't seem to be any prohibition for that. Just that they're not obligated to return them.
Treat them well. Treat them good. They're people. Okay.
No, it doesn't say anything about treating them well. It just says do not oppress them.
Chattel slavery? No, opposite. You would be.
And it doesn't matter. That person is still a chattel slave, regardless of whether they're being treated well or not being oppressed by the nation that they're going into, does not change their chattel slavery status. And again, that's not an Israelite's chattel slave. That's someone that's probably from another form, from a neighboring tribe or neighboring nation coming into their land.
Be beaten into submission and forced back in to your old labor camp and then beaten by your master. Pretty severe. Chattel's not even close to what the Bible says.
Yeah, you don't have to be beaten for you to be chattel. He's doing it again. A person could be under the status of chattel slavery. That could be the status they're in. Beating does not need to apply. They can be treated well, still chattel slave. Doesn't matter. I really wish people would get out of that mode of thinking. Just because a chattel slave is a chattel slave does not mean that they're going to be beaten, going to be abused. They could be beaten. They could be treated harshly by their masters, but it's not a requirement. That doesn't have to be seen in order for the status of chattel slavery to apply to that individual.
This is total opposite. In Deuteronomy 24, if someone is caught kidnapping and treating or selling them as a slave, the kidnapper must die. So put.
Okay. Let me go back there. I wanted to read something from Slim Jim goes, I get beaten and I'm a free man. Streaming on a weekday, fucking slacker. This is my weekend. Jim, this is my weekend. Okay, he's going to read the one.
As a slave.
Did my internet just go out?
In Deuteronomy 24, if someone is caught kidnapping and treating or selling them as a slave, the kidnapper must die. So put to death. So not only.
Okay. Deuteronomy 24. Now, in the NRSVUE, it sounds like the individual in the video is saying that this would apply to every stinking individual, any human being. If someone is caught kidnapping another Israelite, enslaving or selling the Israelite, then the kidnapper shall die. So even if they kidnap an Israelite, they enslave them or sell them, the Israelite, then the kidnapper shall die. That's Israelite on Israelite kidnapping. Because what does it say? If someone is caught kidnapping another Israelite or selling or enslaving the Israelite, then that kidnapper shall die. So that would be that Israelite. And again, I've pointed this out in other videos before. People have heard me say this. Slavery is not predicated on kidnapping. You do not need kidnapping to have slavery. Uh, do, 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 do. Yeah, I think I've said all I need to say about that one. I don't think I need to dive too much deeper into that. Yeah, if you read that verse, there's nothing. That's Israelite on Israelite kidnapping. It's not necessarily for outsiders. It's not really for foreigners. There is an interesting verse though. Mm, I'm trying to find it. One second. There it is. Mm, mm, mm. Bear with me. I'm looking for one. I had one set up, and it was one that I had found the other day. It was pretty interesting. Yeah, here it is. So this is part of this is in Judges 21. So I'll just start in um I'll just start right here. And this the Benjamites saved from extinction is the title of this particular is at the start of this particular chapter. Then the whole congregation sent word to the Benjamites who were at the rock of Rimmon, and proclaimed peace to them. Benjamin returned at the time, and they gave them the women whom they had saved alive for the women of Jabesh Gilead, but they did not suffice for them. Um, Here's where it gets interesting. The people had compassion on Benjamin because the Lord had made a breach in the tribes of Israel. So the elders of the congregation said, "What shall we do for wives for those who are left, since there are no women left in Benjamin. And they said they must be heirs. There must be heirs for the survivors of Benjamin in order that a tribe may not be blotted out from Israel. Yet we cannot give any of our daughters to them as wives, for the Israelites had sworn, "Cursed be anyone who gives a wife to Benjamin." So they said, "Look, the yearly festival of the Lord is taking place at Shiloh, which is north of Bethel, on the east of the highway that goes up from Bethel to Shechem and south of Lebanon." And they instructed the Benjamites, saying, "Go and lie in wait in the vineyards, and watch when the young women of Shiloh come out to dance in the dances. Then come out to the vineyards, and each of you carry off a wife for yourself from the young women of Shiloh, and go to the land of Benjamin. Then, if their fathers or their brothers come to complain to us, we will say to them, 'Be generous and allow us to have them, because we did not capture in battle a wife for each man, but neither did you incur guilt by giving your daughters to them.' The Benjamites did so. They took wives from each of them from the dancers whom they abducted, and they went and returned to their territory and rebuilt their towns and lived in them. So the Israelites departed from there, and there at that time by tribes and families, and they went out from there to their own territories. So they went out and abducted a bunch of women. Riot.
If you kill somebody, whether it's a slave or a non-slave, and you kill them, you get put to death. But if you kidnap somebody and force them into slavery, you should also be put to death.
That's for an Israelite. But the other thing that he's referring to is Exodus 21. And Exodus 21 is kind of interesting because it doesn't actually say that the person who has killed the slave outright is to be put to death. And I'll read that so that if this individual sees this video, he'll know what it is that I'm talking about. And so it says when you yeah, whoever strikes a person mortally shall be put to death. A person. If it was not premeditated but came about by the act of God, then I will appoint you to it. So if it was not premeditated but came about by an act of God, then I will appoint to you a place to which the killer may flee. But if someone willfully attacks and kills someone another by treachery, you shall take the killer from my altar for execution. Whoever strikes father or mother shall be put to death. Whoever kidnaps a person, whether that person has been sold or is still held in possession, shall be put to death. So similar to what we find in Deuteronomy. Whoever curses father or mother shall be put to death. When individuals quarrel or one strikes the other with a stone or fist so that the injured party, though not dead, is confined to bed but recovers and walks around outside with help of a staff, then the assailant shall be free of liability, except to pay for the loss of time and to arrange for full recovery. Then here, when a slave owner strikes a male or female slave with a rod and the slave dies immediately, it says the owner shall be punished. But if the slave survives a day or two, there is no punishment, for the slave is the owner's property. So again, there's nothing in verse 20 that says that the slave owner will be killed for that, just that they will be punished. Because that's not a native born Israelite, that's not a free citizen, that's a slave. Um, well, that's an interesting, yeah, the judicial laws given to Israel don't apply to Christians today. I don't know why atheists obsess about this. It's not really an obsession. It's the fact that for some reason Christians want to deny the narratives. And if it is the case that Christianity holds, so you're holding to the belief that Jesus is God and that Jesus is the son of the Father, which is Yahweh, which is the God that is depicted in the Old Testament, that God, who would be, I guess, for the dogmatic purposes of most Christians, the Father, is saying that slavery is okay for them to do. So, and so why is it that it was okay at one point? And the other thing is that some Christians don't hold to the idea that nothing in the Old Testament doesn't apply to them, right? That Jesus basically fulfilled the sacrificial atonement portion of the law, but not the actual part about where you're supposed to adhere to those laws. And again, slavery is something that is permitted. It is not ordered or commanded. It is like you can have them if you want them. And it is prescribed that if you want male and female slaves, in Leviticus 25 anyway, you purchase them from your nations around you or from the foreigners that are residing amongst you. So it's not an obsession. It's just a critique. And it's funny to watch um, Christian theists try to downplay it and try to walk it, either try to read it away, and they can't. And like this guy right here from Atheist Lies, that's the name of the channel, um, he doesn't seem to really, his reading of the Bible is not, his interpretation is being guided a lot by his bias and by his dogma, right? He's already shown that he thinks that beating a slave is something that is entitled or something that is something that has to take place or is a requirement in order for chattel slave to apply. Nothing of the sort. There's nothing there that says I don't know where they get that from. But no one should be denying in any way, shape, or form that in the Bible, in Exodus, in Leviticus, in Deuteronomy, and in other places in the Bible, there's clearly the ability that God is saying, you can have slaves. Not that you ought to have slaves, not that you have to have slaves, you can.
That's in Deuteronomy 24. You must purge the evil from among you. That's pretty blunt. Okay. So, I mean, this is the problem with people that don't know scripture. They believe the atheist lies. It's so obvious in the Bible that the atheists spread nothing but lies. Okay.
No, you haven't made that demonstration. It could be that they're reading it incorrectly. So you have an issue here with the fact that you think that the people that you're talking to will read these scriptures exactly as you were reading them and derive the same exact meaning from them and then are purposely twisting them in order to make them look as though they're in favor of slavery when they're not. You're going to have to show that intent by those individuals. It's not a lie if they're just wrong, right? If they're just in your mind, if they're so you if a person reads something and then tells you, "Hey, I read this," and you go, "Well, you're wrong. I think you're incorrect here." And then you have a discussion on that, that doesn't mean that the person lied. That just means they're mistaken. Lie means that they knew better and they intentionally meant to and are intentionally meaning to deceive someone.
Masters, do not threaten your slaves. Do not threaten them. Okay. Ephesians 6:9. Do not threaten your slaves.
Again, he's going to Paul, and it doesn't change the fact that the slavery is there. They're still slaves. Paul's just saying don't threaten them. It's not saying that slavery is not a thing. It's not saying don't have slaves. It's just saying don't threaten your slaves.
If you buy a servant, he is to serve you for 6 years, but in the seventh year he shall go free without paying anything. He doesn't owe you nothing, he can walk free. You cannot work him past 6 years. Exodus 21, verse 2.
Okay. When you buy a male Hebrew slave, he shall serve 6 years, but in the seventh he shall go out a free person without debt. If he comes in single, he shall go out single. If he comes in married, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master gives him a wife and she bears him sons and daughters, the wife and her children shall be her master's, and he shall go out alone. But if the slave declares, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will go out a free person. Then his master shall bring him before God. He shall bring out the door, be brought to the door or the doorpost, and his master shall pierce his ear with an awl, and he shall serve him for life. So you read something there and didn't read it all the way through. And then here's the other part. When a man sells his daughter as a slave, she shall not go out as the male slaves do. And again, this is this is different from Leviticus 25 because in Leviticus 25, when it comes to Israelites being indentured servants, they serve to the year of Jubilee, the 50th year. There is no Sabbath year release in Leviticus 25, but the treatment is different. There's more considerations given in Leviticus 25 than here in Exodus 21. And there's more considerations given actually in Deuteronomy when it talks about it, because in Deuteronomy, it seems that now in Deuteronomy it states that even female slaves can go free at 7 years, and they are supposed to be given provisions so that they don't fall back into indentured servitude. And here's the other thing: the people that the Israelites captured, those were plunder, so those were slaves. In Numbers 31, the women who had not slept with men were kept as spoils of war. And it even when you read Numbers 31, it talks about how the number of those females were divided amongst the individuals, the amount of women there were, and how they were divvied out with like cattle and all this other shit. Another Israelite, not just any person, an Israelite. Again, I just read Judges where the Benjamites went out and abducted a bunch of women dancing in a field and took them as wives. Huh? Where are you getting that from? This is weird. I okay, this is clearly a mistake. I don't know where he's getting this from in any way, shape, or form. I don't know what he's read about the year being 18 years of age and them getting paid. Uh, The children are being used in payment of a debt, and I will give an example of that. Okay, this is one of my favorite examples to use when it comes to people who kind of like bring up the whole kid issue. So this is Elisha and the widow's oil. Now remember that this is the Second Kings is written chronologically. It's it's the writings of what happened, the stage in which Moses is receiving the laws at Mount Sinai is years and years and years before what's happening here in Second Kings. So Elisha and the widow's oil. Now the wife of a member of the company of prophets cried to Elisha, "Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that your servant feared the Lord, but a creditor has come to take my 2 children as slaves." Elisha said to her, "What shall I do for you? Tell me what to do. Tell me, what do you have in the house?" She answered, "Your servant has nothing in the house except a jar of oil." So, and it keeps going. It talks about how she uses this one jar of oil, collects, Elisha instructs her to get a bunch of like empty jars from her neighbors, and they just keep filling them up with oil. So it's like this endless supply of oil is coming out from this one jar of oil. And then once they're out of other jars, the oil stops. Then they use that to pay off the debt. But the children were going to be taken as slaves. That's the whole purpose for her doing this, for her asking for Elisha's help and the miracle and what happens. It's all based on the fact that her husband is dead, he had outstanding debts, and the creditors get to come and take the children as payment. Now, if those are Israelite children, they can only have them for so long. At least, well, if you're going off Leviticus 25, they could only serve until the year of Jubilee. But they can be redeemed. Either way, they can still be taken by force. They're being taken as slaves for the payment of debt. None of this thing about, oh, they're 18. Oh yeah, you can go ahead and go work with them if you want, but you will get paid. No. That's a modern idea of
Slave would be paid. Not in chattel. Chattel slavery they did not pay you. Nope. Um, I mean,
yeah, exactly. So the chattel slaves would not be paid. But Israelites, but what you're referring to there, if it's depending on the children, they would not be under the they would not be taken as they would not be seen as movable property. So he's not keeping within with what's going on within the culture. If they're Israelites and if it's Israelites and Israelites, then it's not the same, right? So if an Israelite man, if a Hebrew sells his kid, gives his kid over, uses his child, a male child, to serve someone else in payment of debt, that male child will go out on the seventh year, at least according to Exodus 21. Not a female, but not a female, not his female daughter. She is not, at least in Exodus 21, is not obligated. They're not obligated to release her on the seventh year. But that's for Israelites. That's not for foreigners.
it's just it's just unbelievable. I'm looking through a bunch of verses here, so
And again, not all foreigners would be slaves by default. They would be the foreigners that are purchased as slaves, or foreigners who sold foreign slaves to the, so like if the Israelites went like in Leviticus 25, the Israelites went to another nation that had slaves and bought slaves from there, or the foreigners that were living amongst them were selling their children as slaves, whatever, or they were indentured and could be sold into slavery, they would be owned as property forever, or could be forever. There's no obligation for release.
so if in Proverbs it says, "One who oppresses the poor to increase his wealth, and one who gives gifts to the rich, both become poverty." So basically, it's stealing from the poor, and that ties into slavery too, because the atheists, you guys just love to say, you guys would take advantage. They would buy the poor and force them into slavery. No, is
No, I don't know who's telling you that, but the I mean, it could possibly happen if you had a rich enough. If you're talking about Israelites with Israelites, then you do have the issue of whether or not they become certain Israelites become really rich and start buying up too much land. Either way, even if they did do that during a 49-year period, on the 50th year, everything resets anyway. And in Leviticus 25, it gives instructions that basically, depending on the level of destitution of your fellow Israelite, there are certain steps that they're to take to kind of help them out. Right? In Leviticus 25, it talks about if the Israelite sells himself to you, to another Israelite, because he is so impoverished, you are to treat them as a bondservant. You are to treat them as a hired worker or a bondservant, not as a slave. It makes that distinction. But that's Israelite on Israelite. So I don't think I don't and this goes to the creator of this video. I don't think you're reading your Bible very carefully here.
it says that if you did those sort of things, you would also become poverty stricken as well.
No, I don't know where it says that.
To teach you a lesson for what you did. Okay, where's the other one here? Okay, so now we're talking about harming them. And
So that again, you don't have to harm a slave for a slave to be a slave, but I like it when he brings up that kind of stuff and then doesn't show it.
Exodus 21, verses 26 through 27. It's November, mid November, and I have allergies. What in the world? Because it's been so warm. It's been in the 60s. Usually we're very cold this time of year, in the 20s. Um, if you hit your slave, male or female, in the eye and destroys it, it must let the slave go free to
Yeah,
compensate for the eye. You
yeah. And what are they? They're a slave. So you're not debunking slavery because they're a slave. It says they're a slave, and if you destroy their eye, you let them go out for nothing.
let them go free. You are no longer able to have slaves because you are.
No, you're no longer allowed to have that slave. That slave goes out free. It doesn't say that they're not allowed to have slaves anymore. But you're reading more into the text than you need to. Yeah, when a slave owner strikes a male or female slave with a rod, and let me share this tab. When a slave owner strikes a male or female slave with a rod and the slave dies immediately, the owner shall be punished, but if the slave survives a day or two, there's no punishment for the slave, for that is the owner's property. 26. When a slave owner strikes the eye of a male or female slave, destroying it, the owner shall let the slave go, a free person, to compensate for the eye. If the owner knocks out a tooth of a male or female slave, the slave shall go out free, a free person, to compensate for the tooth. It doesn't say anything about that slave owner ever being able to have other slaves. I don't know how you read into that.
A sick bastard. You need to be destroyed, basically. Let them go.
No.
If you knock out your tooth, you need to repay that. It's basically in Exodus 21 saying, if you're doing these type of evil things, you're going against the law, you will repay them.
No, you don't repay them. They just go out free. They're no longer a slave. Yes, can they get another slave? Can they get other slaves? It doesn't seem to say they're prohibited from getting other slaves to replace that one.
They will no longer have to be a slave, and you will be chastised. And
Yes, but you're forgetting the part that they were a slave to begin with. So you're not debunking, you're not saying that there's no slavery here because the status in which they were in as a slave to be beaten in order to have an eye damaged or a tooth knocked out is taking place. Right? That's the casuistic. It's presupposing slaves. It's saying, yeah, they're slaves. But if you have a slave and you do this and it destroys an eye or knocks out a tooth, then they go free.
dealt with appropriately by the law um, for your bad actions. You shouldn't be doing any of that.
I don't know where you're even getting that from. The casuistic is if this, then that. The quote unquote punishment, the consequence of the act is that the slave goes out free. The slave owner loses that slave. They go out for nothing. They don't get to sell them. They don't get reimbursed any money. The slave is free.
Opposite of chattel, cheetah. I like to call it cheetah slavery because a
No, it wouldn't necessarily be the opposite of chattel slavery. Again, you don't need to beat your slaves for them to be considered movable property.
guy had an absolute fit that I was calling it chattel slavery. I don't care if you call it Chittum slavery, whatever you want to call it.
It's chattel. The term chattel is literally means movable property. That's how it's used.
Everybody has different ways of pronouncing things. Trump calls China China. That's not China. And if you said it in front of me, I'd be like,
Now, he says it's kind of like China, but it's beside the point. Who cares?
China? Cool.
You still sound like an idiot when you do it, but it's chattel.
Okay. Everybody says things differently, but it's actually supposed to be chattel. That was one I already read. Okay, so in Exodus 21, 2 through 6, if you buy a Hebrew servant, he is to serve for you for 6 years. And they deny that. It's right there in Exodus 21. But in the
Who denies that? The Hebrew slave is not the same as the foreign slave being purchased in Leviticus 25. But he hasn't really gotten to Leviticus 25 yet, so maybe that's crossing some wires or something or in the discussions where it's been brought up, but that's a Hebrew slave, that's a fellow Israelite.
7th year, he shall go free without paying anything. He doesn't owe you nothing. He just walks. If he comes alone, he is to go free alone. But if he has a wife, when he comes, she is to go with him. So they can come in and work together, husband and wife. They could be teenagers, they could be male, they could be female. If you came in single, you left single. If you came in married, you left married. Now, it goes on to say that if you had your wife and kids come with you and you wanted to leave after the 6th year, you could leave. If they wanted to stay, they could stay
Oh,
and
whoa.
continuously work. But it's up to them. They don't have to work past 6 years. You release them, but they can come and make the choice to stay and continue to work.
What?
It's up to them. It's not a forced thing. They are out of bondage. Okay, there's really no bondage anyway. They can leave anytime they want. You just can't work them past 6
What?
years.
What are you talking about? That is not what that even says. It talks about if the man comes in alone and the man is given a wife by his master. Let me put that up again. When you buy a male Hebrew slave, he shall serve 6 years, but in the 7th he shall go out a free person without debt. If he comes in single, he shall go out single. If he comes in married, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master gives him a wife, and she bears him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be her master's, and she shall go out alone. The wife and her children shall be her master's, and he shall go out alone. But if the slave declares, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out a free person. Then his master shall bring him before God, and the whole piercing thing happens. So, how did you get the idea that the wife and the children could stay with the master and work longer while the guy goes out, or the husband goes out on his own? That's weird.
Okay. In Deuteronomy 15, it talks about selling themselves to you. They would sell themselves and give you money to hire them. Okay. So it's just a different custom, different way of doing things. It's thousands of years ago. It's the Middle East. This is not modern America. Um, and it says on the 13th, Deuteronomy 15:13, and when you release them, do not send them away empty handed. That's not chattel. Chattel, they wouldn't send you away, and they're certainly not going to give you stuff.
That's because they're not chattel. Yep. So he goes to 13, but he doesn't read it. So Deuteronomy 12, it starts here at 12. If a member of your community, and it's all part of these laws concerning the Sabbath, the sabbatical year, if a member of your community, whether a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman, is sold to you and works for you 6 years, they don't give them money to work for them. They are liquidating themselves. They are in place of monies. I don't know where he got that from. The person is selling himself as property. The woman is selling themselves as well, in this case, they're indentured servitude. They're pledging their service in to another Israelite as payment or restitution for debts owed. So in a case where they owed a lot of money to someone else or to multiple individuals, that individual who they are quote unquote selling themselves to is paying their debt for them. And then in exchange for that payment of debt, that person works for the person who's paid off their debt. They work for that person for that amount of time. And in Leviticus 25, it goes into the calculation. But again, Leviticus, it's not a seventh year release; it's a 50th year release. So, and when you send a male slave out from your free person, and remember, it says if a member of your community, right? Whether a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman is sold. So it's not talking about foreign slaves here. It's talking about fellow Israelites. So you work for 6 years. In the seventh year, you shall set that person free. And when you send a male slave out from the free as a free person, you shall not send him out empty-handed. Provide for him liberally out of your flock, your threshing floor, and your winepress, thus giving him some of the bounty with which the Lord your God has blessed you. So basically, since this Hebrew has helped you become successful, has helped you in your land, give to them something on their way out so they don't fall back into slavery. They don't fall back into indentured servitude. That's, yeah. And then it says here, down here, it's like almost like footnote, you shall do the same with regard to your female slave. That's not in Exodus 21. And then it says 18, do not consider it a hardship when you send them out from you free persons, because for 6 years they have given you services worth the wages of hired laborers, and the Lord your God will bless you in all that you do.
Supply them liberally from your flock, your threshing floor, and your winepress. Give to them as the Lord your God has blessed you. Bless them. Give them horses, give them grain, fill their pockets, fill them up. Verse 14, Deuteronomy 15:14. Supply them liberally. Atheists, how do you sleep at night knowing that you trash the Bible and make up all those lies? And it's
I, I've I, That's interesting. I've heard you make up more shit about the Bible than any atheist or non-believer that I've ever met. I I don't even know how you're going. I don't even know how you've drawn some of the conclusions that you've drawn. And some of the things that you've just basically said, oh, look, see, that's what it says. No. Some of the verses that you've read do not say what you're saying they say.
It's right here in the scripture that you're a liar.
No, it doesn't make the claim that they're a liar. You're making the claim that they're a liar. And the reason you're saying that they're a liar is because for some weird reason, you've got it locked in your head that these people should be reading and interpreting the Bible exactly the same way that you are. And so you know that they know what they know. You know that they know exactly what the Bible says because you're reading it and know exactly what the Bible says, right? So if they're telling you differently, they're obviously trying to deceive you. They're lying to you because they should clearly understand it the same way you do. But the thing is that I've been going through this for the past almost hour now. Past hour, yeah, over an hour. And I don't think you clearly understand this either.
But if you, and this is verse 16, but if your servant says to you, I do not want to leave you because he loves you and your family and is well off with you, he's making a lot of money, he enjoys you guys, then take and
It doesn't necessarily mean he's making a lot of money. He could be getting some money, but again, it's Hebrew and Hebrew, it's not a foreign slave.
all and push it through his earlobe into the door, and he will become your servant. It's not literally saying to stab him into the wall. It's a play on words saying, let him stay, let him work.
No, it's marking them. You're giving them an ear. They're getting a piercing to show that they are an Israelite that is indentured, that has pledged themselves indefinitely to another Israelite. That's what that piercing represents. That's the mark. That Israelite has basically said, I am not going to go out free. I'm going to be a servant for life to this fellow Israelite.
He likes it there. It's like a forceful way of saying, here, I'm embracing you, I'm hugging you, welcome to my family, come on.
It's also a way so that you know that that Israelite doesn't get reset. So let's say if we were to apply Exodus 21 with Leviticus 25, the whole Jubilee thing, the whole reset at the 50th year, that Israelite right there that has sworn himself to the other Israelite to be basically their slave forever, they don't go back, they don't reset. But again, that's my opinion on it. I'm just looking at it from kind of an overarching concept because every 50th year, everything reset. Everybody went back to their homes. Everybody went back to everything. Everything just kind of reset. But so here you have an Israelite, a native-born Israelite, who is selling themselves to another native-born Israelite. And then after on the seventh year, they decide, I'm going to go ahead and stay with my Israelite master, my fellow Israelite who is my master. They get that piercing because they're sworn to that person for life. So it probably makes sense that when the Jubilee comes around, they don't get to leave. They don't become free after that. But that's kind of the difference between when that's trying to reconcile Exodus 21 and Deuteronomy 15 with Leviticus 25. Because Leviticus 25 doesn't even make allowances for a seventh year release.
On in. And then do the same for your female servant.
But not in Exodus 21. That was added in Deuteronomy. It's not applicable in Exodus 21.
Do not consider it a hardship to set your servant free, because their service to you these 6 years has been worth twice as much as that of a hired hand. And the Lord your God will bless you in everything you do. Deuteronomy 15. And yet, all those lies, the, what did the atheists say? The complete 100% opposite of everything I just read to you out of the Holy Bible.
You haven't even shown an atheist to do that. You haven't even demonstrated any atheist doing that, or that they understand it exactly like you do and are intentionally just trying to deceive you. Do you know the verse about bearing false witness? Just curious.
Liars. It's proven right there.
Nope.
How can you lie so blatantly about scripture that's right there? You can find it, and I told you where to find it. And I'm sure the comments down below
And I went through and found the same scriptures and read them and found the places where you got it clearly wrong.
will be hilarious. If you want to read those comments and you're not an atheist, believe me, you're going to get an eyeful because the lies
An eyeful or an earful?
are going to flow.
Whoa, what are you going to show us that's going to give us an eyeful? Jesus. Don't do it.
I mean, absolutely. It'll be bonkers how many people, first not, but after I give it maybe 2 weeks. It could be 4 weeks, but it'll be absolutely hundreds, if not, and then it will be thousands. It'll
Huh?
be unbelievable how many people will comment on that. Atheists.
How would they comment on it? You have all your comments turned off. Or maybe this was before he turned off. Because I've been to his channel, all of his comments are turned off.
Do not like truth. They do not like facts. And if you read out of the Word of God, it ticks them off. So the retaliation.
Really? I've seen Christians get ticked off when Justin on Deconstruction Zone reads from the Bible.
In the comments will start and commence soon. God bless you. Have a good day. The truth be.
He must have done this video. I know, if I remember correctly, this video was done. It says on his channel like from 2 months ago or so. But it might have been one that he took from his other channel. So I don't know how old this video actually is, because he did a video saying that he took some of his videos from his old channel and put them on this particular channel that I'm looking at here. So, but I know that he has comments turned off. He has the comment section turned off, and he talks about, oh, I'm not here to have any conversations and stuff like that. So all the comment threads are disabled. So this video must have been done during a time where he was allowing comments. Either way, that's pretty much it for that one. Is slavery still a topic? Yes. Yes, Tom, it still is. And it's still very much a boring one. But I found that one interesting, so I figured, yeah, I'll do a little commentary on it. But because I found it really interesting that I've always found it interesting that when people claim, they always jump to the conclusion that if a skeptic, a non-believer, whatever, is telling them something about the Bible, and they go, that's not what it says, or at least in their mind, that's not how they remember it, or they don't interpret it the same way, that the person must be lying. And so it is, yeah. So they're assuming that everybody is going to read these passages and interpret them the same way, right? I read it this way, so if I read it this way, you should have read it that way and gained the same meaning from it. So the fact that you're telling me it means something else means that you're clearly lying to me, right? Because we should all be able to understand these the exact same way. But I'm sitting here listening to him read certain verses and then come to conclusions that are not, or even make claims about things that are not even found there. Like the idea that the kid has to be 18 years old. Like, what are you talking about? 18 years old. Oh, and they're going to get paid. I don't know where you're getting that from. Where did you get that from? or the idea that the wife and the kids can stay with the master and the husband can just go out and do his own thing, but the wife and the children will stay and the wife will continue to work for the master. That's not even remotely what that even, I don't even know how he got there. So even though the topic is boring and it's old and it's been beaten beyond the point of even a bloated corpse, it's it's interesting to see how people will read these verses and then do whatever they can to kind of either make it so that they can show that yeah, atheists are liars, and then you start to actually see their thought process. Like it was like he kept appealing to the idea that the only time you're going to have chattel slavery is if there's beatings. And I'm like, what are you talking about? There's nothing about chattel slavery that requires a beating. So like multiple places, oh, right here, they're not being beaten. They're to be treated fairly, right? Don't threaten them. So see, not chattel slavery. Wait, so chattel slavery is predicated on the treatment? Okay, I don't even want to know. What is this? Sergeant Slim Jim says, funny, Satan told Martin Luther that the Catholic Church is wrong and the Protestants all believed him. Tom Tom says, I'm not sure you can blame Satan for that, Sergeant Slim Jim. And Sergeant Slim Jim says, yes, I can. I just did. Oh, really? Okay. I noticed Dr. Josh is here. Um, oh my God, this guy. He blocked me. And then I didn't block you. No, sorry, I meant the guy in the video. See, I didn't even know anything about this. I didn't even know anything about this guy. It came up in one of my recommended feeds one day, and I was like, okay, atheist lies. Okay, he proves it through scripture, and I'm like, okay, let me. It's not a very long video. Let me give it a shot here, and then I played it. Listened to. I didn't listen all the way. I got about halfway through it. Now that I remember, and then I just went. Now I'll save that. I'll save it, and then maybe he'll say something surprising afterward. Maybe I'll get honestly surprised by something he says later on in the video. And that one part did surprise me. The part about the wife and the children staying with the master where the husband just goes out, so they stay. And I'm like, no, you apparently just glanced over that part in Exodus 21 where it talks about the master giving the male Hebrew slave who comes in single a wife and children, or a wife, and then he has children with that woman, and then now it's his time to be released on the seventh year, but the women and the children would stay with the master. They don't get to go out like the guy does. So gotta love it. But anyway, that's 90 minutes for that video. I've spent enough on that bullshit. So yeah, that guy is like, I'm curious if Dr. Josh is still here. Dr. Josh, were you like pivotal in his decision to shut down his comment threads? Because there are no comments allowed on his channel anymore. Here, I'll show you. So here's the channel, Atheist Lies, at the whistle blows. If you do more here, it says right here, not here to convert you, just to show the lies of atheism, whistleblowing the lies of atheists. My theist channel doesn't get the draw, so I'll transfer to this channel. At beginning of those vids, you may hear hello theist channel, or this is for the theists, etc., whatever. My creators hold or shut off comments to combat spam, hate, bullies, trolls, and I have little to no need for convo, just here to correct the lies. You have to demonstrate that they're actually lies and not just assume. That's amazing. I always get a kick out of that. But yeah, so it apparently whatever Dr. Josh, I wonder what Dr. Josh wrote to this guy. I can't imagine it was all that offensive. I've seen Dr. Josh troll me. I've seen Dr. Josh troll my brother. I've seen Dr. Josh. I think he's trolled Kip Davis. The best though is when I trolled Dr. Josh. He was on, I think he was on the line, and I wrote something, and I almost, oh man, I wrote something, and it was like I could hear the barrels and the hammers cock. It was it was intense. I was like, yeah, there it is. Yep. I may have I may have gone a step too far here. Or the one time when somebody was like, I don't understand what you have a problem with Dr. Josh for. And then I think it was Megan had to step in. It's fine, it's what they do. Hilarious. But yeah, so here it is. Go to his videos. None of these videos. Um,
I'm trying to watch South Park.
oh, that explains some issues. So see, 0 comments. Oh, this one, it says you can add a comment. Did he turn comments back on? Because one of them, a couple of them that I clicked on didn't allow for, because I think that one doesn't allow for.
Oh,
Yeah, comments are turned off for the video that I just reviewed. The comments are turned off for that one. Not for his newest one. So what's this one?
I'm trying to watch South Park, but I keep getting all these comments. Would I be an atheist? As per
Hmm. Well,
other religions.
we'll turn off. What are you doing? Why? If you're trying to watch something, turn your shit off. You don't need to read comments and shit while you're trying to watch something. So
yeah.
this one's from earlier today.
I mean, that to bring that up here is dumb because this channel is about Christianity. So we're not talking about Muslims here. Every once in a while, I mention other religions, but typically not. This channel is about identifying lies of the atheists and whistleblowing them. Correcting.
Okay. But that's the problem again. So you're still stuck on that. And I have not seen you show someone who has intentionally lied to you. All I'm going off of you is your claim that you think that atheists are lying to you because they're telling you something from the Bible, and you're reading from the Bible, and then in your mind thinking that, well, see, they must have clearly read this the same way that I've read it, so they have to be lying. If you are of that mindset, you're clearly mistaken. You have to show the intent to deceive. And so far, it seems to be insinuated. The only thing I can get is possibly insinuated by your video, at least the one video that I've reviewed, is that you think that everybody should read these scriptures. They're just as plain as day as you. And yet you had problems reading them too.
Those lies and Christianity versus atheism because they don't believe in our God. I don't care whether or not you believe in Allah or not. It's absolutely moot. I don't care. This channel is about Christianity.
Yeah, but you don't believe in Allah, do you? So are you an atheist when it comes, is it your position that you believe that Allah does not exist? That would make you an atheist in the sense of believing that Allah doesn't exist. Isn't that what an atheist is? Right? Don't some people say that's what an atheist is? An atheist isn't just, it's not a person who's epistemically void or a lacktheist. It's someone who asserts that they believe that no gods exist, or that some other gods, a god or gods, do not exist. So if you're saying that you believe that some other god or gods do not exist, you would be an atheist in that respect. You believe or you don't believe. You haven't been so, and you can also turn it around. You can also say, well, I'm not convinced of those other gods existing because I am of the position that I believe that this God exists and this is the only God that exists. This is the only true God. Any other deity claim, any other concepts that come about would be automatically false for some reason, whatever. Either way, you're finding a way to justify an epistemic position as to why you accept the proposition of one God being the case and no other gods being the case.
Not Muslim or Islam or Pinocchio.
Islam is, a Muslim is someone who is of the Islamic faith. So yeah, that's
Island. I don't care about any of that. All that is riffraff, and I get people that
Allah. Wait, Islam is riffraff? Really?
do comments like this, and it's like,
I don't think you understood the comment.
what? it just makes me laugh. I mean, yes, according to Muslims, I don't believe in Allah, so yeah, I would be a heathen. They would want to take my head. They would want to kill me, and
But does that make you an atheist? Are you atheistic when it comes to the proposition of Allah being God or being a God?
I probably would be considered an atheist. I've never heard other religions, they just call you heathens. I've never heard them use the word.
Well, you've never really thought about it, have you? What's your definition of an atheist? Other than the fact that you seem to be of the position that all atheists are liars.
Atheist, but I suppose they might think I am. Who cares?
Well, you seem to think that all atheists are liars. I think that atheists now have I think that atheists might be justified in challenging you, right? If you're an atheist, because you think that atheists, I mean, unless it's the case that you don't think atheists, some atheists are not liars. Some atheists do tell the truth.
Who cares? And the fact that atheists care about all that shows the mentality that I'm dealing with.
Who says, well, maybe they don't care. Maybe they're lying to you just to get a rise out of you. Maybe they're just being dishonest and trollish. It's not that they actually care. They just want to push your buttons, see how you react.
If you don't believe in God and religion, why are you here? Why did you click on the video? Why are you replying? Why are you trying to have a conversation?
This question has been asked and answered multiple times. If you're dealing with individuals that think that the country that they live in should comport to the particular standards of a religion, yeah, then people will sometimes speak out against it. And there's nothing wrong with people being critical of religions, right? It's funny that I mean, you just dismissed Islam as just being riffraff. But now you're asking about why atheists care? Or why atheists would even challenge you? Be glad that they're challenging you. They're not just dismissing it in whole. You just want us to dismiss the religion entirely and not question it, not consider it? Just say, yeah, it's bullshit. It's all horse shit. It's all fairy tales. Be like those. I mean, I've seen atheists still do that. Yeah, it's all fairy tales. Just forget about it. But the reason they'll still engage in the conversation is they get some kick out of it, especially for people who very much take it seriously. Maybe they just like to watch people squirm when challenged. Either way,
Conversation. Why are you looking for stuff? You don't believe in it. And why are you getting upset when someone says you'll go to hell?
are they getting upset? Which of the atheists are you talking to that get upset if you tell them that you're going to hell? Are you telling atheists that they're going to hell? If that's the case, how do you know they're going to hell? How do you know there's even a hell? See where I'm going?
You don't believe in hell.
Yes, but you do. And we have to live with people. Some people have to live in a society where there's a lot of other people thinking that everybody, like, there are actual Christians out there who honestly believe that human beings are just inherently dog shit, and that the only thing that gives people any kind of gives any value isn't an inherent value. It's not real value that we're born with. It's if we are seen to be worthy of God. It's the fact that God would even just say, "Oh, you know what? I'm giving you a way to become worthy in my eyes." That's the only, but other than that, without that, you're a worthless pile of shit. I've seen Darth Dawkins appeal to it. I've seen Smokey Saint appeal to it. There's been a couple others that I've seen appeal to that. As I think Sam Shamoon does the same thing. There's been multiple YouTube Christians and Christians that I've seen on TikTok doing their shit where they hold to this idea that all human beings are inherently garbage. They're just shit. And without God, that's all you're ever going to be. And you're deserving of all the shit that shit deserves. Just to be just waste.
Yeah.
Now there's some incredulity there. Woo, shoo. All right, that's enough of that guy. Sorry, just reading my stuff here. Just reading the live chat. All right. So, yep, hour and 43 minutes. So, a little over 2 hours. I'm ending it. See ya.